那开场的话，一样喜欢我们直播的话，可以点赞、订阅、开启小铃铛，然后一起来直播上面聊聊天哦。OK， 那就像刚刚说的，我们今天再来打一点长腿爱德华 Long Leg 战役。那刚刚已经看了嘛，是西欧战役里面的不列颠人，所以先来看一下不列颠人吧。OK， 随着罗马军团撤退之后，不列颠就进入了黑暗时代。那蛮族就入侵了，大概维持了400年的时间。那塞尔特人从爱尔兰渡海过来，然后命名了北方的部分叫做苏格兰。盎格鲁跟萨克逊人跟盎格鲁人则是来自日耳曼，还有一些例如说弗里斯兰人、朱特人。那后来是盎格鲁人跟萨克逊人控制了大部分的英国。所以后来，到后面只有主要是盎格鲁人跟萨克逊人，还有塞尔特人3个民族。那于是新的居住者就被命名为盎格鲁萨克逊人。然后后来命名了这个地方叫做英格兰。但是还是被不断入侵这样子。但是这个地方以后就被称为英格兰。然后北岛是叫苏格兰嘛。865年有新的入侵者，就是丹麦人，这个维京人，丹麦的维京人。然后大部分的领土都被维京人占领了，只剩下大地，阿佛列大地。那后来就是以割据的方式换取和平，然后丹麦人慢慢成为基督徒之后就安定下来。后来英格兰人开始攻击这些维京人。这些丹麦人，那最后一个维京的国王，也在954年的时候被杀害了，所以英格兰再次被这个英格兰人给统一。然后1066年的时候有这个王位之争嘛，例如说原本的伯爵哈罗德，还有这个挪威的国王哈拉尔，以及我们的诺曼底的威廉公爵3个人。那在这个王位之争里面，首先是挪威人先登陆，但是在斯坦福桥战役被哈罗德打败。那后来哈罗德马上再转头跟威廉作战，但是后来哈罗德被流箭射中死去，然后威廉就征服了英格兰，也就是成为了征服者威廉。那威廉在诺曼底，就是在法国的贵族，所以导致说这个英国跟法国的贵族的继承权的问题，投入很多时间在保有他们法兰西取得土地，也就是这个继承权的部分。所以后来就爆发了100年战争。那起因就是因为英格兰的国王说我是法兰西的合法继承人，也就是因为威廉的关系。那当然还有其他原因啦，例如说羊毛贸易或者是法王支持苏格兰独立这样子。那一开始当然是英格兰的这个大幅领先。虽然说英格兰在英法战争前面是有大的优势，但后期却没办法结束战争，而且法兰西也恢复了元气，在圣女贞德的号召下反击，而且就是击败了英国。最后保有加来的地方，后来也是可能就失去了这样子。OK， 至于英法战争的故事，我们要在圣女贞德的故事里面才会完整体现到，还蛮热血不错的。OK， 这就是不列颠人的历史。那后面就是演化成现在的英国了，所以这个文明并没有消失了，还在。行，看一下科技树。不列颠人是一个不工兵的文明，然后开 TC 的费用减 50%， 人家要275，他只要130多，137左右，蛮划的。步工兵在城堡时代跟帝王时代会各加1射程，所以他的步工兵非常强啊，这个传统的步工兵文明。再来是牧羊人吃肉的速度会提升 25%， 所以吃肉蛮快的，但是打步工兵用不到肉，有点尴尬，赶快点1级射吧，大概是这样子，1级射、2级射这样子。特务单位是长弓兵，的人35滴血6攻5射程的长弓兵，那一般弩兵35滴血5攻，这攻击力，所以代表说你的长弓兵攻击多1，然后升到精锐之后。攻击力增加1，然后射程也增加1，然后有1点远防。那你看强弩兵就没有加射程嘛，所以你的强弩兵射程就会比较差一点。 然后攻击也比较低，甚至也少一点远防，所以整体来说长弓兵是比较强一点的。特殊科技银冠是义勇骑兵，步弓兵的射程会+1，然后箭塔伤害+2，所以蛮强的，应该是会点，因为我们主要打步弓兵。然后金冠蛮厉害，战狼号你的巨头会有爆炸伤害，就是一个范围伤害这样，蛮实用的。团队加成是射箭场的训练速度提升10%，就是你的步弓兵升比较快啦，也是实用。军事建筑的话，射箭场是步弓兵。但是因为那个射程关系就没有给你拇指环平衡一下，但步弓兵还是能玩。马弓的话，因为没有安息人，然后步弓兵又那么强，所以马弓一般来说不强。军营的话是全开的，不管你要玩骑兵还是剑勇都 OK。那马就不太能够玩，因为它没有品种，所以的骑兵血量会少20滴血，不太能玩。有跑速，所以你的马弓还是有10道跑速，还是还可以。公共提制造所没有重冲，也没有火炮，我觉得最重要的2个东西都没有，蛮可惜的，感觉不强。兵工厂全满，但是如同刚刚我所说，我们不会玩马，只会玩工兵跟步兵。海军的话完全没问题，造船员、船坞，那只少了精锐火炮，那也不是大问题。大学没话说，几乎全满，除了火炮塔。修道院就蛮弱的哦，没有救赎思想，也没有赎罪思想，僧侣战完全不强。但是其他的话还可以，算是普通，能玩，就这样。那我们就开始吧。第一关是致富的野心。Go。
It is the curse of all royalty to be compared with their forebears. My illustrious father built himself a kingdom in his youth. Now I can barely hold on to it in mine. I hear all of the nobility's whisperings at court. They say that I may be King of England by birth, but I will never be so by merit. That I, Edward II, am unworthy of my father's name. How much longer until these whispers become cries of rebellion? My heart quivers when I visit his tomb in the abbey. I am racked by fear. It claws at my soul like the talons of demons. Fear that I will prove them right. That I will disgrace this family's legacy, as my grandfather did. Yet I must not give in. I will study my father's reign, and hope that it will imbue me with his strength, the fortitude that I so lack. My father, Edward, spent his youth watching in disgust as his ineffectual father, Henry, drove England to the brink of ruin. When his subjects could bear his ruinous reign no more, a rebellion led by the Baron Simone de Montfort deposed Henry, leaving his kingdom in tatters. After the disastrous Battle of Lewes, the baronial forces captured and jailed my father and grandfather in Hereford. Some kings begin their rise to the throne from within the palace. Edward began his from the anguish of imprisonment. Yet even when the future seems bleak, fate occasionally extends its hand and offers allies from the most unlikely of places.
任务长腿爱德华比较活着，吉尔伯特要活着。好哦，城堡时代耶尔伦口，我可以有3种方式逃离：偷船、跳下去、从正门的城堡杀出血路。谢谢哦。积极进攻，好，要迅速撂倒一切。能征服就不要摧毁，夷平城镇中心或城堡就可以征服橘色、绿色、青色跟黄色。哦，这4个都是敌人。好，男爵军队会死战到底，但他们的补给是由当地城镇提供的，征服城镇就可以减少资源。好哦，所以我们就拆城镇中心跟城堡就可以了。好，我们被关在这个赫里福德，有个意料之外的盟友杰伯特。那灰色会加入我们，会变成我们的城镇，在中间，然后橙色在南边很脆弱，建议我们赶快把它干掉。绿色东北方有一座小城堡，也是不错，可以处理，但是附近好像有一大支军队。赫里福德是青色，是戒备森严的城镇，先不要打。OK， 南军军队是精锐部队，好哦，先不要。然后西北边是黄色，好哦，所以先打南边，再打东北方，先打橙色，再打绿色。OK， 会了。
Come, Lord Edward. Let us make haste and escape whilst the town lies asleep.
收工了吧？
A grave mistake was made in backing the barons. The proud men of Wales will support your cause henceforth, Longshanks.
The rebel forces fall like grain to the scythe. With their forces in disarray, the rest will be compelled to fall before me and beg for mercy.
噔噔噔。
Like his Norman ancestors, Gilbert de Clare was a shrewd opportunist. Initially a commander in the rebel army, he keenly sensed its divisions and saw that he could further his own ambitions by defecting to Edward. My father moved with alarming speed. Worcester and Gloucester, Gilbert's family seat, were seized without delay. After a string of further victories, he compelled the leaderless and battered rebel forces to capitulate. Known by many as Longshanks, Edward was feared for his imposing stature and foul temper. While Henry was restored to the throne, all were well aware that Edward was now the true power behind it.
再来是大家说很麻烦的第二关，是不是？上帝的指明啊，要去东征了，感觉是要去十字军东征呢。Go。
Ruthless and cunning, Edward did not always adhere to the chivalric codes that the European nobility held so dear. After massacring Simone the Younger's men in a stealthy night attack on Kenilworth, he used the captured banners to disguise his army before smashing de Montfort at Evesham. In an act of alarming brutality, the corpse of de Montfort, an Earl of England, was hacked into carrion and his head mounted on a pike. Edward had won the war and cowed the rebels into submission in just over a year, but the victory came at the cost of his honor. Nobility and clergy alike cringed at the thought of an impious butcher one day ascending to the throne of England. To restore his ailing reputation and prove himself worthy of the crown, my father resolved to lead a crusade east to the Holy Land, where the situation grew increasingly dire. The voracious Mamluk Sultanate waged a fierce war of expansion, first against the Mongols and now against the beleaguered Crusaders. Several fortresses quickly fell before their unstoppable onslaught. Their leader was Sultan Baybars, a man not unlike my father Edward. Originally a slave of Cuman origin, he rose to prominence through military service and had recently taken power after murdering the reigning sultan. Having just slaughtered the population of Antioch, his armies now threatened Oka and Tripoli from the east, converging on both cities in a suffocating siege. Edward's army arrived in Oka to find the inhabitants desperate, but not beyond hope.
刚刚战役有几个算是彩蛋吧。第一个是现在对抗是库曼奴隶，就像我们之前库曼战役讲到了嘛，库曼人被蒙古击败之后，被蒙古人卖到这个当做奴隶兵的一种，然后后来他们建立一个苏丹国，就是奴隶兵的国家，所以这边又跟他们遇到了，算是一个小彩蛋。第二个彩蛋是又再次提到阿卡城，这里的阿卡城不知道是不是那个萨拉丁的阿卡城，感觉有点像，有趣。守住阿卡城跟迪里波里蓝色，直到他们撤退，而且要至少守住一座城堡，怎么这么麻烦？我们只能城堡125，而且无法训练村民哦，哭啊！要尽量用长弓兵，好用海洋资源捕鱼，并且跟他贸易，小心舰队。十字军骑士会听从我的指挥，好哦。蒙古会憎恨马穆鲁克，好哦。红色抵达了阿卡，然后还有我们的盟友迪里波里，好，黄色有几个要塞，好，然后青色受马穆鲁克控制的城市，然后还有马穆鲁克苏丹国绿色，还有海军哦，然后有紫色跟灰色。 哦，可以把紫色跟灰色打掉。行，在南边跟东南方向，行的。橙色在东北边目前没动静，好，可以。开场没得弄，我们看怎么打。没村民，资源剩超级多。
Call off the attack. What we cannot achieve through force, we must accomplish by stealth.
呼！
The fighting was vicious. Droves of crusaders and Mamluks alike fell, spattering the battlements and the fields surrounding Oka and Tripoli with blood and gore. Throughout the crusade, my father proved his mettle as a tactician and as a statesman. Fearless when faced with peril, he led a daring raid that devastated the enemy towns of Nazareth and Cocoon. Following these victories, he convinced the terrifying horde of the Mongol Ilkhanate to descend upon the Mamluks, devastating the region around Aleppo. The hitherto invincible Baibars was overwhelmed and forced to withdraw. But before doing so, he sent a Nizari with a poisoned blade to remove his capable rival. Edward slew the assassin, but a wound in his arm left him bedridden for months.
那我们就进行第3关，城堡与国王。
Edward left the Holy Land in an uneasy truce. Baibars had promised to keep the peace for 10 years, 10 months, and 10 days. Now, with more pressing matters developing back in England, my father could only hope that the Sultan would keep his word. While Edward was away on crusade, building his reputation as an honorable and capable leader, his father Henry died, leaving him the English crown. He returned to an England both stable and eagerly anticipating his arrival. On August the 19th, 1274, the Lord Edward was crowned Edward I of England. Wishing to expand his new kingdom, Edward set his sights west towards Wales, an old enemy that had supported Simon de Montfort during the Baronial Rebellion. The Welsh prince Llywelyn ap Griffith constantly antagonized the Anglo-Norman marcher lords on the border. Adding insult to injury, he took Simon de Montfort's daughter, Eleanor, as his bride. My father pounced on the already fractured Welsh factions, seeking to conquer them piece by piece. But if there was one thing that the Welsh princes hated more than each other, it was Englishmen imposing their laws on Welsh territory. Llywelyn's brother, Dafydd, joined the fray, and the brothers waged a war of stealth and ambushes, defeating Edward's southern armies under Luc de Tanny and Gilbert de Clare. Seeing that the hardy folk of these mountainous forests and coarse heaths would not bend easily to his will, my father changed tactics. If the Welsh could not be crushed in open battle, they would be brought to heel from a series of impenetrable castles.
我刚发现这个爱德华其实是威廉的后代子孙呢，就是征服者威廉后代子孙，蛮酷的。好，第一个任务是前往第一座城堡的位置，可以升到帝王了，然后150人口，没办法盖城堡，学，还有火炮战船，可以上帝王，那我们就可以升金冠了，不错。抓紧时间行军，守卫城堡，建筑中死亡就失败，哎呦，哭啊，要守哦。威尔斯人擅长打就跑的机动战术，好嘞。供养威尔斯军队的农民会提供资源，杰瑞农民，好，我们就直接 raid 一波。权衡胜利之路，击败一个敌人，或者是击杀2位亲王，好不？我们带着军队抵达威尔斯，要监督保护这些石匠。蓝色坐拥南边跟东南边，会带来剑兵、战矛兵跟骑士，来帮助我们防守堡垒。所以蓝色是我们的兄弟。那黄色在西边，青色在北边，有2个领主，2个领主杀掉就算赢这样子。还有威尔士军队，绿色在西北边。 会来进攻，带着剑兵跟战矛兵。战矛兵，不列颠蛮怕战矛兵的，可能要想下战矛兵要怎么办，可能用攻城器、弩炮或投石车来解决这样子。OK，Let's go。
March swiftly, men. We must reach the castle before the Welsh rebels butcher our masons. I wanted Davith alive to make a grim example, but dead is just as good.
诺曼人对吧、诺曼人虽然前面是
Without our bold leaders is to no avail. We must submit to the English king and pray for his mercy.
我们看一下结尾剧情。
The Welsh fought valiantly, but they were no match for Edward's wrath. My father's forces outmaneuvered Llewellyn's forces and smashed them at Orwyn Bridge. The Welsh prince fell to the lance of a lone rider who knew not the importance of the man whom he had slain. His brother Davith was captured at Nanny's Glen and declared a traitor to the English crown. Edward pitilessly condemned his bold adversary to be drawn and quartered. Wales was now firmly in my father's grip. He bestowed upon me the title of Prince of Wales, which shall be an heirloom of my line henceforth. The network of formidable fortifications that Edward constructed throughout the land shall ensure that the Welsh bow to the English crown for generations to come.
那我们进行第4关喽，空外套。
I fear that I am deceiving myself in studying only my father's achievements in war. As king, I must be both a warrior and a statesman, just as he was. Drawing inspiration from the legendary stories of King Arthur, Edward grew from a deceitful and duplicitous youth into a pious and chivalrous ruler respected throughout Christendom. My father implemented economic, administrative, and legal reforms that strengthened and stabilized his kingdom. His borrowing of Byzantine concepts led him to be known as the English Justinian. Yet to Edward, this was just another part of ruling effectively, and everything that he did furthered his fierce desire to rule over all of Britain. When Alexander III of Scotland died without a male heir, that ambition suddenly seemed within reach. My father first strove to marry Alexander's young granddaughter, Margaret, to me, the heir apparent to England. When she died, unexpectedly, just a year later, Edward instead installed John Balliol as king in Scotland. The proud Scots would not suffer themselves to be ruled by an English puppet, whose master sought to conscript them into war with France. Instead, they allied themselves with the French and rose in open rebellion. Edward's fury was unbridled. If Balliol could not hold his subjects in line, my father would seize Scotland by force.
好，第一个任务是打败驻军占领贝里克，打败绿色。175人口，没有火炮，没办法盖石墙，没关系，我们只需要城堡。贝里克城墙很坚固，需要庞大的部队跟工程武器。是哦，要怎么打？要胆大心细。OK， 迅速占领贝里克会比较轻松，可是如果太拼的话会输。辐射河上只有一座桥可以控制住桥。命运石，好，记得夺取命运石。红色已经到苏格兰建立了一个营队，贝里克城在东边有驻军绿色，强大的军队蓝色在北边跟西北边。有骑兵、重装长兵跟工程武器，还好这个长弓兵都可以解决。黄色有个斯康修道院 ，OK， 我们可以去打一下这个斯康修道院 ，OK。
Take two and set this siege swiftly. I want Berwick taken before word of our advance crosses the Firth and brings an army of frenzied rebels.
Grayton?
Yes. I am ruined and my forces crushed. Place myself within your power, King Edward.
结束了。
Father was unspeakably cruel to the Scots. In retribution for an attack on Carlisle, he seized and sacked the wealthy town of Berwick, slaughtering some 20,000 inhabitants. Balliol, the puppet that Edward had installed as king in Scotland, proved himself a traitor. He marched the Scottish army south against the English, but it was viciously drubbed at the Battle of Dunbar. Begging for mercy, Balliol capitulated to Edward, who scornfully stripped him of his coat of arms. This disgrace earned him the moniker Tomb Tabard, empty coat. As a final humiliation, Edward seized the coronation stone from the monastery in Scone and placed it in a chair in Westminster Abbey. That hallowed stone of Scone, a symbol of Scottish royalty, shall now sanctify the destiny of an undying line of English kings.
那我们就最后一关了，苏格兰之锤 ，Go！
The Scots did not take their humbling well. A year after Balliol's defeat, they rallied around the fiery knight William Wallace and poured out of the Highlands like rabid wolves. Wallace was said to be a 7-foot-tall giant who lopped off the heads of horses and men with a 5.5-foot sword. A barbaric match for my own ferocious father. After a string of unexpected victories, Wallace's rebels were scattered at the Battle of Falkirk and forced into hiding. Like a vengeful spectre, he continued to harry English troops and convoys from the shadows. Undaunted, Edward and his commander, Aymer de Valence, approached Stirling Castle. Accompanying them was Robert the Bruce, a Scottish lord sworn to Edward, but known to covet the Scottish crown. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, as the ancient adage goes. Taking after his famed predecessor, Richard the Lionheart, he ordered the construction of a massive set of trebuchets near the walls of Stirling. His warning to the defenders was simple and dreadful. Surrender, or face bombardment more ferocious than a rain of hellfire and brimstone.
行，在苏格兰的时候进攻的时候要保护英格兰的工程师黄色，然后200人口，没办法建火炮战船，没问题。明智管理你有限的部队，好。哦，杀死华勒斯就可以让他的手下鸟兽散，看来华勒斯就死在这里。罗伯特觊觎苏格兰的王冠，哦，他会背叛。哎呀，绿色。行，建立前线基地。我们在外面扎营，还有另外一支军队陈设在这里。好，城堡灰色由绝望的驻军紫色防守，威廉华勒斯蓝色在西南方的这里有一个贴身守卫。封城绿色，哦，这边是史特林城堡。好，绿色在东北方。行，那就出发。
This infernal castle has held out long enough. I will build the largest trebuchet that Europe has ever seen. Earl Aymer, double the guard and protect the engineers while they gather wood and stone for the weapon.
打完了，我想说，
glorious victory, King Edward. The Scottish forces are routed, and Robert the Bruce flees to the Highlands with his tail between his legs.
Let him call himself King of the Outlaws if he should so desire. His skulking followers shall whisper of me in terror as the Hammer of the Scots.
William Wallace's body was butchered, and his remains were scattered across Scotland as a grim warning to any who might fancy themselves a heroic rebel. Yet the effect was the opposite of what my father hoped for. The dying embers of rebellion were kindled into a raging flame as the treacherous Robert the Bruce renounced his vassalage and raised his banners. With his last war still raging, my father, the mighty King of England and Hammer of the Scots, passed away. England is now mine to rule. His vision mine to fulfill. Or to squander. Robert the Bruce remains a threat. And unrest brews throughout England. Even my own barons openly show their contempt and demand that my powers be diminished. I have studied all that my father did, and still the task at hand terrifies me. He faced every adversity and grew to be a great king. Yet I already feel my soul buckling under the weight of the crown. I am king now. But what king shall I be? Should I be deceptive, as my father was in his youth? Should I be the pious and chivalrous administrator? Or brutal to no end, the new hammer of the Scots? However can a man become so great as to fulfill all of these roles? I fear that there is no answer. Even so, when I stand by my father's tomb, the fear and the shame sometimes sweep aside. Deep within me, I know that whatever else I must try, I must fight for my crown, my kingdom, and for my father's legacy. I will not fail you, father.
Edward II 其实也是蛮努力的啊。那我们就完成了这次这个长腿爱德华战役全部金勾勾。那这场直播到这边哦，喜欢我们直播可以点赞、订阅、开小铃铛，然后一起来直播上面聊天哦。